I grew up with a pretty goth mom, which meant that we dyed a lot of clothing black in our household when I was a kid. And I gotta tell you, to this day, I think if you have clothes that end up with a stain or a discoloration, or you just don't like the way they look anymore, most of these problems can probably be solved if you just dye that thing black. And you might be like, yeah, but that sounds hard. How easy is that? Realistically, am I gonna do that? And I'm here to tell you, it is so easy. All you need is the garment, some dye, a bucket, and a stick. I love my bucket and my stick. So the first thing you're going to want to do is figure out if your garment is natural or synthetic fibers, and I swear this is the hardest part of the whole thing, but it actually isn't that difficult. Natural fibers would include things like cotton, wool, linen, silk, and synthetic fibers would be things like nylon, polyester, maybe something like rayon, which is technically a semi-synthetic, but it's chemically treated, blah, blah, blah. The only reason you need to know that is that there are different dyes for natural fibers versus synthetic fibers, which means it's easier to dye things if you get the right correlating dye for the fiber content. But truth be told, if you get it wrong, it'll still kind of dye it a little bit usually, and if it doesn't do a good job, you can just dye it with the other kind over it, and it'll be totally fine. We're working with real low stakes here if you make a mistake, is what I'm telling you. Once you figure out what type of dye you are going to use, you literally just get a bucket, fill it with water, throw the dye in, use your stick to mix it around, add clothing, and poke at it a bunch with that stick until it's fully submerged, then just let it sit. Use the instructions on the back of the dye to determine how long you let it sit, and from there you just drain it, make sure you give it a good old wash under some water so that all the extra dye comes out, and then launder it like normal, and presto. You got a whole new wardrobe if you want it. Yeah. There are methods where you can dye your clothing using a washing machine, but in my experience, that gets a little tricky because sometimes there's a residual dye left over and the next load of laundry you do, it just gets a little color on it. So I say go bucket and stick 100% of the time. Happy dyeing.